Hello, and welcome to the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. I'm Grace Rooney. I'm an intern in the Marketing and Public Programs Department at the museum, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to our inaugural New York Jewish Book Festival. The event right now is Mother Daughter Traitor Spy, Intrigue, and German Nazis in America with Susan Elia MacNeal and Lynn Sher. We hope you'll enjoy all 32 events that are happening through the museum today, meet some of the 85 speakers, and get books signed at one of the 72 author signings we have going on in the main lobby and events hall on the second floor, which Susan will be there immediately following. And then you can also pick up holiday gifts and books at the Pickman Museum Shop and Visitor Services in our main level. And we're encouraging people to wear masks in the museum today, and we hope you'll share your feedback with us in a post-festival survey, which we'll email to you tomorrow. And then while you're here, we also encourage you to take time to visit our exhibitions, The Holocaust, What Hate Can Do on the main level, and Survivors, Faces of Life After the Holocaust, photographs by Martin Scholler, who's also giving a talk today on the third floor. And then Andy Goldworth's Garden of Stones is also worth a visit outside, just outside of the Cafe Locks on our second floor. The whole museum is open for you guys today. And then this program is made possible in part by support from the Battery Park City Authority, and your donations also help us in making these programs. And now I'm glad to introduce you to our speakers. Susan Elia MacNeal is a New York Times bestselling author of the Maggie Hope Mysteries. She won the Barry Award and has been nominated for the Edgar, McCavity, Agatha, Left Coast Crime, Dillies, and ITW Thriller Awards. Mother Daughter Traitor Spy is her first standalone novel. And Lynn Sher spent more than 30 years with ABC News, covering a wide range of stories at 2020 and World's News. She is the author of numerous books, including the New York Times bestseller Sally Ride, America's First Woman in Space, Swim, Why We Love Water, Tall Blondes, a book about giraffes, and Failure is Impossible, Susan B. Anthony in her own words. Cher is currently freelancing on a variety of platforms and co-host of the podcast She Votes, Our Battle for the Ballot. Mother Daughter Traitor Spy is available for purchase following the program, and Susan will sign copies for half an hour after the event in the resource area in the events hall on the second floor. So without further ado, please welcome Susan Elia MacNeal and Lynn Sher.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming. And I'm told, some of you overheard, this is the first Jewish Book Festival at this wonderful museum. And so we are the first of the first, and we are the first people in this room for this festival. So we're groundbreaking. Oh, sorry. It is on. Mine is on.
Is mine? Oh,
Yeah, sorry. Mics are on. One would think I would know something like that. One would be surprised what I don't know. Anyway, welcome to all of you. Thanks for coming out on a Sunday morning. Thanks for coming to the Wright Museum.
my agent is currently in transit.
I'm delighted to be here with my friend, Susan. And the reason I want to tell you why she's my friend is because I started reading the Maggie Hope series, and I love them so much that I just emailed her and I said, I love what you're writing. Can we meet? And so we've been friends ever since.
We have
so,
been.
I encourage you to get in touch with authors that you like because it can lead to very nice experiences. This book, of course, is not Maggie Hope. Mother Daughter Traitor Spy is, however, about a very important subject. It is also a page turner. I will assure you right off the top, if you have read the book, we're going to give you some terrific backstory. If you have not read the book, and I know you're going to line up and buy it afterwards, and Maggie will sign it for, Susan will sign it for you at 11:15. But if you've not, we're not going to give any spoilers. So you can be assured that you can sit and listen with both ears wide open, and we're not going to wreck it for you. It's not only a page turner and a great story and a mystery. It's a historical thriller that deals in a very elegant and exciting way with a topic that unfortunately is completely with us again today. Talking, of course, about anti-Semitism, talking about sedition. And this book is also about family. Mother, Daughter, Traitor, Spy. There's really nothing more relevant in our current lives. So let's get started. And Susan, I want to dig right in. You created the wonderful Maggie Hope. By the way, any of you read Maggie Hope yet? Okay.
Oh, wow.
So you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read Maggie Hope, it's also for your reading list. Maggie Hope is the very charming and very clever star of her mystery series. We'll get back to Maggie a little bit later, but let's talk about this. You've done how many Maggies? 12?
10 so far.
10 Maggies so far. What made you say, I got to hold Maggie off for a minute and I want to try something new? What was the inspiration for Mother Daughter Traitor Spy?
You know,
Which, by the way, I'm sorry.
Oh, I have it.
Oh, you have it. We're going to hold it up just so you see the great cover of this great book that you'll be able to purchase later. Okay.
Thank you, Lynn. I was actually doing research for a Maggie Hope book, The Hollywood Spy, in which Maggie Hope goes to Los Angeles and solves a mystery there, and also encounters American fascists and, Nazis there. And while I was doing the research, and by the way, I have to do a shout out to my husband who's in the back filming, but so he was
Noel's back there looking,
Yeah.
trying to look as if he's nonchalant. He's very involved in all this.
Hello. Well, Noel is one of the Sesame Street and Jim Henson Muppet puppeteers and directors, and he was doing Muppets at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. And at the airport, he found this book called Hitler in Los Angeles. And it's by Stephen J. Ross. It was a Pulitzer Prize nominee. And he bought it for me. And this is my joke. He's like, I'm ready for it. But, some husbands get jewelry or candy for their wives. I got a book about Hitler. But the truth is that it was mind-blowing. I feel like I know things about World War II, but I knew nothing about Los Angeles before and during World War II. And this book just kind of blew my mind. So I knew I had to bring Maggie to Los Angeles. And then when I was doing the research, so basically it's this man, Leon Lewis, who he was Jewish and also very aware of what was going on in Germany in the 20s and 30s. And he told the FBI, the police, everyone about the danger of rising fascism. And basically no one cared. They were all interested in catching communists. And quite frankly, some of the police and FBI agents were probably fascist as well. So he created his own spy network. And he, with a few other people, recruited a lot of Gentiles, German Americans who could pass and who had the right background. And so he got all these people to work for him, and they did infiltrate the Nazi groups. And there was one pair, a mother and a daughter. They were the only females that he talked about, Ross. And I was just so fascinated by the idea of this mother and daughter going undercover together and doing this. And I wanted to know who they were and why this happened. And that's why I wrote the book.
I want to, before we get back to the book specifically, I want to take a little detour because, a slight detour. This is so relevant to today. So much of what is in the book and so much of what you discovered in that book is so connected to where we are today. And I was just taken by, they were all interested in catching communists, not Nazis.
Yes.
And that it has been so much of the history of what goes on in this country with right wing and left wing, that it's the left that the government is always after, and the right doesn't bother them. Did it strike you? Well, of course, how long ago did you start your research on this?
I was researching during the pandemic.
Well, so we were getting where we are now. And did it strike you that it had resonance with what's going on in our country, in our world today?
Oh, absolutely. As it did when I was writing The Hollywood Spy, because I remember when Trump sort of first came out of the woodwork, a lot of people said, well, where did this come from? And then with the neo-Nazis and the far right movement, where did this all come from? And the truth is, it never went away. There was a far right pro-fascist faction in America, and during the time of fascism. And when World War II happened, they had to go underground because, of course, we were at war and they would be considered traitors. But the feelings never went away. And so this is a continuation. What we see today is just a continuation of a movement that went underground for quite a while and now is coming to the surface.
With it's being cheered and brought to the surface, and not just drifting. Yeah. When you did your research, again, we're stick with the facts at the what you found. What shocked you? What surprised you? What scared you?
Well, what I found shocking was how completely unguarded Los Angeles was. It's a port city. It's a military city. And it was completely open. And it was open in a way that New York City was not, because Mayor LaGuardia kind of knew what was going on and he put in protections. And of course, we did have Nazis and spies here in New York, but people were aware of it and there were things being done to counter that. In LA, it was just wide open. And that's terrifying to me. Like a port city was
Right.
wide open.
Right.
And, San Diego was wide open. And they were getting like reports on where the ships were. And, this is before Pearl Harbor. So anyway, that was terrifying and striking. And I didn't know that. And it was just it's so vulnerable.
It's interesting because I don't know how many of you are aware of the U-boat that landed in Long Island in Amagansett, which was also it appeared wide open. It was not wide open. There was a patrol there, but they missed them at first, and that one wound up kind of ridiculous because those guys had no clue what they were doing. But they were coming here.
They were coming here. And there were Americans doing business. They were using like little charter boats, fun little boats to go and meet up with Nazi submarines that were coming from Mexico. They were taking, very careful notes about what was going on in San Diego's harbor. There were a lot of really bad things going on then.
You mentioned that there were two women, the only two women, so some things haven't changed.
Yes.
Tell us about Grace and Sylvie Comfort. Who were they?
Well,
these are the real women.
These were absolutely real women. The thing is, I really only have their births and their deaths and the mother's marriage. We know very little about the actual lives of these women, except for their role in this group. And so when it came to fictionalizing them, I really had to kind of create people from scratch. And this is where like the journalism fiction thing comes in, because their characters are fictional. What they did is grounded in reality.
So this is interesting because I'm very interested in the crossover between what's fact and what's fiction, and how do you take a real situation and turn it into fiction, as she does with all of her books. But what exactly, as far as you can remember, was in that book about them? What did it say? It said their names. It said there were two women who were part of it.
I know that they worked as, the daughter worked as a secretary for a Nazi organization, a propaganda group.
In LA.
In Los Angeles, in East Hollywood, if you want to get specific. And her mother, who was a Navy widow, was sort of embraced by the naval wives and, of the community, the Nazi community, and also brought in to be a friend and could then spy on them. So, a secretary
But that's all you knew?
That's all I knew. I mean, I actually was able to see transcripts of meetings, the minutes of meetings that Sylvia typed up for her various bosses, because she became very popular and very, she took shorthand and did the typing and did everything. So she was very popular with all of these right-wing groups, and they all wanted to hire her to do their secretarial work, and she made the most out of that. And so really, I've seen her typing, but I know so little about her.
Was there any physical description of them?
No.
Okay, so now you're put on your fiction writer hat, and you see this germ of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
How do you decide to turn them into Veronica and
Violet.
Veronica and Violet. How could I forget Violet? Mom is Veronica. Mom is
Violet.
Mom is Violet, and the daughter is Veronica. How do you decide what to turn them into?
Well, I had an original idea for Veronica. I wanted her to be a New York girl. I wanted her to come from New York City, which was, although still flawed, like somewhat more integrated than the rest of the country, certainly than LA. I wanted her to be a Hunter College graduate because Hunter had been integrated since I think 1873 and also had many, many Jewish students as well. So she would have a wide variety of friends and peers and, you know, colleagues at school. And so she would have sort of a position to come from, as well as Violet just living in New York. And then I wanted her to be a journalist. And this is where it's like things just sort of gel. I was reading this book about Martha Gellhorn. It's called Yours for Probably Always. And it's the letters of Martha Gellhorn. And I knew from writing Maggie Hope that people would be like, oh, well, a woman couldn't do that in those days, and a woman couldn't do this, and a woman couldn't do that. And I was just like, well, you know what? This is what Martha Gellhorn did. She's a little bit older than my character, so I'm going to have my character really look up to her and really want to follow in Gellhorn's footsteps. So there would be no sort of question about, like, could you actually do this? Would you really want to be a journalist? And then also I got to talk to Lynn. And she told me about Brenda's love of Brenda Starr, which I managed to include, and also a little neighborhood newsletter you did when you were little. Family news. Yes.
I printed one edition of the Sher Family News. One edition.
And it's funny because a little person I don't know on our apartment floor is also putting out a little newsletter. So that we have a budding journalist too. But yeah, so I really wanted to have her be a journalist. And then with Vi, it was, again, Lynn, I was walking in the park during COVID, one of my, we've all been there. And I was listening to Lynn's podcast, She Votes. And I was listening to it. I was fascinated. I started looking things up. And then I realized that Violet would have been the exact perfect age to have been a suffragist. And once that clicked in, Violet became so real to me, and why she would step up and do this. Because it's really, that's the question, right? Why do people step up and do this? These were very comfortable Christian people who weren't in any danger at that point. So why would they? Those are the two things I sort of gleaned onto.
I'm always fascinated when I interview fiction writers, because there's generally a point when someone says, yeah, so I created this character and then she just started doing things and I couldn't have said, I don't understand that your character, it's like a cartoon. You animate this thing and all of a sudden it takes off.
I just suddenly understood something about her. And I also understood, just being a mom myself, how you can sort of like lose track of who you might have been or might have wanted to be in your youth. And sort of, you can kind of come back to it. She's in her midlife. Her daughter's graduating from college. My son is graduating from high school. I definitely felt a lot of Violet and her quandary.
It's a fascinating process, the way you get there. Again, you mentioned that LaGuardia actually had pretty good control over what was going on in the city. Not 100%, but certainly aware. We know the Bunt was here in New York City. We know that Madison Square Garden, Yorkville, there was a lot going on here. But again, Los Angeles, La La Land, did it have any connection to the Hollywood itself and the fact that so many of the heads of studios were Jewish?
Oh, absolutely. And I deal with that a bit in The Hollywood Spy. This book, Mother Daughter Traitor Spy, doesn't really deal with that. That wasn't something that the Comforts were involved with. But yeah, the Hollywood studios were involved. There were assassination plots for all of the heads of the studios and Charlie Chaplin and all kinds of people who were thought to be pro-Semitic and friends of the Jews. It was scary, scary stuff. Really terrifying things were being planned.
One of the things that distinguishes the Maggie Hope series and this book is you have very strong female characters, which is really wonderful after centuries of James Bond and all the rest of them. Nothing wrong with James Bond, but it's good to have some women out there. Why do you do that? And is there a special challenge in doing that?
Well, I think I do that because I'm always interested in parts of history that don't get the front page. I'm interested in parts of history that have gone unreported and overlooked, and the contributions of women and Jews have often been overlooked. And I think the challenge with that is that a lot of people have an idea in their head about what women were like in the olden days and what they could and couldn't do. And to a certain extent, that is true. There were so many blockades up for women who were ambitious and smart and intelligent. But there are also so many women, and I'm thinking right now of Martha Gellhorn, who got around that and who did create lives for themselves. And it wasn't easy, but they did it. And I think
You should just, for those who are not familiar with Martha Gellhorn's work, just give us a little Wikipedia.
I'm sorry. Yeah, she was a journalist during the 30s and World War II especially. And she was like, she went on a battleship posing as a nurse so that she could be at the beaches of Normandy and be a firsthand reporter. So she was a journalist like no other. And she wrote so beautifully. And a footnote is she was married to Hemingway, but that's just a footnote.
Yes. Thank you for saying
Yes.
that. All right. So strong women characters. You want to show women could do more than.
And women did, for instance, the Comforts. They really did all of these things. And they really helped stop any number of horrible, horrible plots by working with the spy masters, Leon Lewis. It's just, I found, especially when Mr. Churchill's secretary first came out, there was just this utter disbelief, like that a woman, for instance, Maggie Hope, my character, would want to pursue a PhD in mathematics. Well, there were actually PhDs in mathematics. I had to research that very carefully because not all schools, for instance, Princeton, which was like really like the place you would want to go for math, they did not accept women. But MIT accepted women, and there were women accepted and who went on. So, you have to be very careful. And what I've learned is just I explain everything in my notes at the end so that.
Yeah, that is one of the terrific things is that if you, when you read these books, if you want to read more about something, you give the sources, which is exciting.
Yeah. Well, I always want people to, I want people to be interested. And I want people to find out the real facts of what happened. And I want people to do that. So like, I'm going to give you everything I went through and,
Let's go back to Maggie Hope for a minute because you keep bringing her up and it's hard not to. You've read Maggie Hope. A few people have read the Maggie Hope series. It's again World War II. It's an American woman who goes to England, winds up the name of the first book is Mr. Churchill's Secretary. Not a bad job for a first job for an American woman in London. And she goes on to be a spy.
Mm-hmm.
And she has many adventures. And it's way better than Nancy Drew, okay?
Thank you, Lynn.
But Nancy Drew is all we had for a long time.
Yeah.
I was kind of a Bobbsey Twins girl myself, but Nancy Drew was pretty good. Did you feel the lack of such a thing growing up? Or was there something you wanted to make room for that you didn't have or that you did see?
I guess, when you study history, you study it basically from a very male patriarchal perspective. And I was just interested in like, hey, well, what were the women doing at that time? And World War II is so rich in female contributions because there was such a sea change in the attitudes towards women and what women could possibly do. Also, women were needed because all the men were at the front. Mm-hmm. So a lot of rules got changed and broken. But the female spies of World War II are sort of endlessly fascinating to me. And that's all real. These are all real women who did incredibly dangerous, brave things. And I just thought it would be nice to shine a light on that. I was interested in it.
Bletchley Park.
Any
of you see that series? Unfortunately, very limited. I think it was only 3 episodes. Mm-hmm. A wonderful series about the women who were the code breakers and who worked at Bletchley Park in England. We need more of that. But Maggie goes. What's interesting about the Maggie Hope series, among other things, is we grow with her.
Yes.
So you go. So the first one is she goes to London and she winds up working for Churchill, and then of course she becomes a spy and she's in MI6. And then you go through years with her, and she winds up in Hollywood. The last one, she was in Hollywood, mm-hmm. which is kind of makes a wonderful bookend with Mother Daughter Traitor Spy, because she's also coming up against Nazis in Hollywood. Where's Maggie going next?
Maggie is next going to Madrid. Maggie is meeting up with Coco Chanel, who she met in Paris. I don't know how much people know about Coco Chanel, but she was a Nazi. She was a Nazi agent. Okay, this audience knows.
This audience would know. Yeah.
And she had a mission in 1943, 1944 to go to Madrid under the pretense of opening a store there, because Madrid, of course, was in neutral Spain. And she was trying to broker this separate peace with England, which may or may not have involved Churchill. And it sounds so crazy, but like I started to do research. It's amazing. It's amazing what was going on like in the Third Reich, and like their crazy efforts to like broker a separate peace and the things that they would cling on to. And the other thing I found during my research is Kim Philby of the Cambridge Five was in charge of Spain. So then once I found that out, I had to like throw out my whole outline for the novel, because you can't ignore Kim Philby. So
that's Maggie's next adventure.
Maggie's next adventure is going to be Madrid with Coco Chanel and Kim Philby.
Okay. And how old is Maggie in Spain?
She's 27, I think.
Oh, so she's got a lot of years left to do adventures. I don't like the idea of her, winding down. Talk about the fact that you write about a lot of bad guys.
Yeah.
And bad women. What is that fun, writing about bad guys?
I don't think I would call it fun, but I think there's something in me, I'm really, I really want to know what makes people tick. I really want to understand that. And I've always been drawn to true crime. I've been drawn to, again, poor husband, all my true crime shows, all my cult shows. Like, he does not watch those with me. But there's something about me, like, I just really need to know, like, who they are, why they do it, how it happens, how people get drawn in. And I've got to say, while I was writing this, again, during COVID, and I was watching The Vow on HBO. Has anyone seen that?
What's The Vow?
It's about the NXIVM cult. It's a present day sort of cult, and culminated in charges of sex trafficking and women being branded. It was in Albany, New York.
Nice.
It's crazy, crazy stuff. But these people were so normal, like, because you think, oh well, who would get a brand? Like, who would do that? And then you sort of follow the show, and you're like, oh my gosh. So that actually helped me write about a lot of my Nazi characters. Like, just nobody goes all at once. It's a very gradual, like, pernicious thing.
You also write about murders. I feel strongly that I need mystery novels, crime novels that have murders, because if I didn't read about them, I would commit several of them myself. But that's me reading. Talk to me, please, about writing about murders. Is that fun? Is it gruesome? Is it awful? Is it good? Is it cleansing?
It's pretty gruesome. I mean, it's not just fictional. I think, you get to a certain age and you become acquainted with death, and it's not a fictional thing. Like, these are real people. To me, my characters are very real people. I do care about them. That said, they are fictional. I do work with a friend of mine who's a medical doctor, so we get all of the details correct. And
what's the oddest thing or the weirdest thing that you learned about death that you didn't know about from your doctor friend? Was there any fact you got wrong in writing about a murder?
Oh, she's always telling me I don't have enough blood. It's like, more blood. There needs to be more blood. There'll be a lot more blood here. Like, okay, thank you. It's just, so I have very mixed feelings about it, although it does become also part of a puzzle. And, you have, as an author, I have to lay that very carefully. And I have this funny story about how I was grocery shopping, and I guess I was thinking, like, an editor had said, like, oh, this doesn't really work. You're going to have to think of a different kind of murder. So I'm like, going down the aisles, like, thinking about murder. And apparently a friend of mine called me later. She was like, I was in the grocery store and you didn't say hi to me. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was thinking about murder. And she was just like, what? But then she knows what I do. So I explained. I was just very in my own head.
How many changes does a plot go through like that? You come up with a plot idea and you start to write, and as you write, I assume things change. And then is there an editor? There obviously is an editor involved. have you ever completely changed the way something was going?
More in Mr. Churchill's Secretary, my first book. I completely changed that book any number of times. I think as I've gone on, I sort of know my own pitfalls, and I don't know, I've sort of gotten out of my way a little bit. But, yeah, I've changed a lot. I've changed a lot of things. Even now with Kim Philby, it's like, you can't ignore Kim Philby.
Yeah. You get a lot of what we used to call reader mail. And I probably get a lot of email and online. What's your favorite response from a reader to your books?
One of my favorite responses is this woman her father had served in British intelligence, and she wrote to me, and she was so angry because I'd called SOE, which was the group that would parachute in spies to the different countries and have them blow up factories and whatnot, as a paramilitary group. And that is the correct term for it. But she's like, that's what my father did, and he wasn't in the paramilitary. I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe you could talk to him. And anyway, so we had a very nice conversation ultimately. And she got back to me later and she said, you know what? I talked to my father, who has now passed, and he was in SOE, and he did parachute behind enemy lines in France. And he finally told me what he really did during the war. And so we had that before he died. And I'm getting all choked up right now. But it was just such a beautiful, it was a beautiful thing. And it's just funny because she came in, she was so mad originally. And then, it turned out to be this really cool interaction she had with her father, and this understanding. So,
what's the most bizarre response you've ever gotten from a reader?
There's somebody who was so mad that I called Maggie Hope Mr. Churchill's secretary, because she was actually his typist. And this is true. I do get into this in the book, but the men are the private secretaries. And that was a position, held by men, while women were typists. So the title of the book was in a way misleading, but this person would not let it go. It was crazy, crazy.
And I'm going to bet that the male secretaries got paid better than the female typists.
Of course.
So is World War II just a never-ending source for fiction for writers like you?
It's funny that you asked that, because I think it's opened up a lot since Maggie Hope first came out. I'm not going to take credit for that, but when I was trying to sell Maggie, I was getting a lot of rejections from agents and then editors who said, women don't want to read about wars, like 20th century wars. They want to read about the Regency, the Tudors, the Victorians. They don't want 20th century war. And I think Jacqueline Winspear with Maisie Dobbs kind of broke that open. I think Maggie came along soon after. And then I have to credit Downton Abbey, actually, for breaking the 20th century into sort of like the consciousness of people.
But it never got to
fiction.
it took a long time to get to World War II and Downton Abbey.
But still like the 20th century and World War I. Yeah. So I think what we're now seeing is like the floodgates have opened, and there's just so much about World War II, which is great. And there are all these like stories being told. But now I'm kind of thinking about, well, what's my next move? Like, what do I want to do next? Maybe something different.
You're going to abandon Maggie? You're going to take her somewhere else?
No, but maybe another standalone at some point.
Oh,
yeah.
Well. We're going to, by the way, open it up for questions from you guys in a few minutes. So please get your questions ready for Susan. Your reading list. What's on your reading list?
Oh, I have to say, I don't always read about cults and murders. My very good friend, Linda, was supposed to be here, but she has COVID, and she's fine, but she's just, sniffly. And I am so excited to read her book, The Matchmaker's Gift, because she's a magical, wonderful, charming writer. And this is all about matchmaking, like around Delancey Street. And just, it's so lovely. And I just can't wait to like have this be my holiday reading, because sometimes you do have to take a break from the murderers and the cultists.
I don't.
Oh, well, some of us do.
I'm only kidding. What else? You got more on your list than that?
Oh, I'm reading so much right now for Maggie. So I'm deep into Coco Chanel and Kim Philby and all the rest. I'm learning about Spain, planning a trip to Spain. So that takes up a lot of...
right. Poor thing, planning a trip to Spain.
Oh, I know.
Nobody, when their little kid grows up when asked what do you want to be when you grow up, says, "Oh, I want to be a crime novelist." Maybe somebody does. I don't know. Did you? How did you get here?
Well, I think I always wanted to be a novelist, although I never sort of had the nerve to say that out loud. But I also had a bit of a Wednesday Addams vibe going. So, you know, I don't think it was out of nowhere that I started to write crime novels. Everybody's laughing. It's true though.
Did you start doing? I don't remember. Did you start out doing something else? What were you?
I started out in publishing. On the other side of publishing, I started out as John Irving, the author's assistant. I worked as an intern at Little Random of Random House. I was an assistant editor at Viking Penguin. I sort of worked my way up through the publishing ranks. I was an associate editor at Dance Magazine when the magazine closed and moved to the other coast, and I was unemployed. And that's when I decided I would freelance. That was still a point in time when you can actually make money writing articles. You can't now. And I started to write fiction.
How many rejection slips did you get before you made it?
So many. I would say at least 75.
And your advice to would-be writers, novelists, crime novelists?
Keep going. Just keep going. Believe in yourself and keep going.
It makes a difference.
It does. I think some of us, I have likened it to being a boxer. It's not so much that you're necessarily the best, but if you can stay on your feet and keep going, you might actually make it. So I think, yeah.
I'm guessing there's not too many households where one partner is a crime novelist and one is a puppeteer.
No, I don't think so.
What goes on in that household?
I mean, I think it's a little more puppet oriented. Also because we have a kid. I think my sort of crime, my darker sort of interests. I sort of watch my own documentaries and read my own books, and that's sort of like in my head. And our normal family life is pretty cheerful. And
Noel, did you want to add something to that? If you were going to murder someone, how would you do it?
poison.
That's the easiest?
Yeah. I've been asked that before. Although,
I'm being nice.
as my son,
And I'm accepting no drinks.
I said that my son asked me that when he was younger, and I said, "Yeah, but don't worry. That with forensic evidence these days, like you can't get away with anything." So it was different in the Agatha Christie era. Yeah, but that's why, and also women were never suspected because women were thought to be so gentle and meek.
Before we see if any more questions from the audience, the crime. Mother Daughter Traitor Spy. What's going to happen to the two V's? Do we get more of them? They're pretty interesting characters.
I really like them. I'm hoping maybe that Veronica might follow in Martha Gellhorn's footsteps and end up in France. In Normandy.
You say that as if you have no control over it.
I don't know. I really don't know. Like that's a couple books from now, so I don't really know. But I would like to bring her back in because I just find her so fascinating. And then we hear about her mom.
Would Veronica and Maggie ever meet up?
I think that would be really cool. I think they'd really quite like each other. Even though, they're very different women, but I do think they have a lot in common. So, that could be really fun. And it would be fun to write about an American journalist.
This is good. Let's see if we have any questions from any of you. No pressure, but we'd love to hear from you. Yes.
That's okay.
Were these women traitors to the Nazis or they were traitors to us?
Oh, no, they were on our side. They infiltrated Nazi groups and pretended that they bought all of the propaganda and they bought into that mindset in order to find out their secrets. And then they reported back to their spy masters. Again, the guys who, like the FBI and the police would not take seriously, and they created their own sort of intelligence network. So they were definitely on the side of democracy, on the side of America. all of that. Yeah, and that's not a dumb question at all. It's a very good question.
And so they stopped and foiled a lot of things.
They did. They did.
Don't tell her anymore.
Well, the spy master, Leon Lewis, created this group in the early 30s because he was following Hitler's rise in power very closely, and he saw similar things in the U.S. The actual Comforts joined with Lewis in 1940. So my book is set 1940 through 1941. I think it ends up being like 2 years, but it's sort of Pearl Harbor has a definite effect on everything that happens, and this how the FBI treats the spies. So
In your book is the actual, I the characters of the actual stories that happened.
yeah, they are really, really true. And again, Hitler in Los Angeles, amazing book, reads like fiction, fascinating book. So
And let me I'll get to you in 1 second. Let me just move on. Some detail on that. You've got these women who are on our side, not on the bad guy's side. You've got them sitting in these meetings. They're in real danger.
they are in real danger. And in real life, any of the spies who were quote unquote made were killed, and they were never proved to be murderers, but these spies were killed in these accidents. And I've even read some of like the coroner's reports from these accidents, and it's crazy. They were obviously murdered, but there was just not enough interest in the police or not enough evidence to really prosecute anyone. So yeah, they could have been bumped off at any time if they'd been, found
It's
out.
like all these Russians that fall out of windows.
Yeah, exactly. They hit their head.
Quite extraordinary. Yes, you had a question?
Well, the question okay. Do you know if there are any studies or similar books about those kinds of anti-Nazi spy things in other places in the U.S.?
Just repeating the question, does Susan know of any other books about people who were fighting the Nazis during that period in this country?
There might be some about the spies in New York. I deliberately did not read anything about that because I wanted my story to be my story. Not that I am aware of. Yeah. Yeah. And I get that. I think she was in, yeah. Where was she? Oh, okay. Yeah. She went abroad though. She was an American who went abroad. Yeah. In fact, I was reading The Spy Wore Red for research into spies in Madrid because she went to Portugal and Madrid, and she was in Europe, but she wasn't in the US.
I have to say, there must have been a lot more because Susan and I both went to Wellesley College, and I know for a fact, and I met one of the women who's now gone, but women who graduated in the 1941 era, there was a professor on campus who would call them into her office and say, what are you going to do? And if they didn't have plans, she would, if they were good at math and science, she would say, would you like to learn code breaking, and would you be willing to go to Washington? And a bunch of them went to work in Washington and were code breakers.
That's
and
another one of my book ideas.
Well, the woman, there was a woman who she only died about 5 years ago, and she was one of them, and she was in one of the reunions I went to, and it was extraordinary. So there was a group of them. So I know that these women were being recruited, but not enough has been written about it. So there's a field for you. Go find out and do more. More questions? Yes.
What's your writing day
Oh,
like? How do you, from beginning to the end? I mean, it's always so interesting how authors, because they're all, I mean, are you a heavy plotter and outlines and
I do have an outline. I do have a ton of notes. I kind of get up and I do emails and social media, and then I try to like get in a few hours of writing before lunch, and then after lunch I try to like do a few more like the sort of like business, like it sort of depends on where I am in the novel too. Like right now I'm working on Maggie, and I've been sort of puttering around with it, but now I feel like I'm starting to really get it. Like when you hit page 100, it starts to come a little faster. So that's what I'm hoping will be happening. But I don't know what I'm doing. There's no rule book for this. There's nobody who tells you what to do in the morning. I am comfortable with that, but ultimately,
Did you ever see any of those images? That there's one very famous photograph of Jacqueline Suzanne, Valley of the Dolls, sitting in her writing room, and there are little cards and little stickies all over the wall. I mean, it probably was a wall this size. And do you do that?
I have them in my phone, actually. I have like little, the little notepaper app thing. I use that all the time. I write emails to myself. So I guess a lot of it's just like in my computer as opposed to.
But you don't plot it out.
I don't have the wall space. I live in New York. I don't have wall space. I don't have an office. I barely have a desk.
Everything has changed so much in our world in the last certainly 20 years and in the last 2 years. Is there a difference in what readers expect that changes any way that you go about writing? In other words, is there do you need to get somewhere more quickly? Do you find that the first Maggie Hope is different in a way from their most recent one or from the standalone? Is there something you can put your finger on about the American reading public right now?
That's a really great question. I don't know if my books have changed significantly. I guess what has changed for me as an author because of the rise of the right in our current times, I'm really, really careful to make sure when I write about history, it's writing about history. A lot of people think I might bring in things, but I actually really on purpose stick to the history because I think it's more powerful when it's really what happened in the past, our past, and then we can look at it and see, the reader can like obviously draw conclusions from that. But I, the author, am not doing it. I am sticking to what happened back then. So I'm very careful about that. And of course, I do get emails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get political
Oh,
oriented?
yeah.
Like what? Give us an example.
Like I'm super woke and,
and that's a bad thing?
yeah, it's a bad thing. Apparently that's bad now. Yeah. So, and I'm pushing a left agenda and I'm this and that and the other thing. And I just kind of ignore it all, really.
I guess that's fascinating. What I was thinking of also is in my business, in the television world, when I started out at my first television job was at CBS Local, Channel 2. Mm-hmm. And I remember for the 6 o'clock news, my first piece might have been 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And that was a regular length of a piece on the 6 o'clock news, whatever it was, a water main break, the mayor did something, anything. Those pieces are now approximately 14 seconds. Has something similar happened in the writing world, do you think? Do readers want to get there more quickly?
I always sort of got there quickly myself. Like I always basically my books start out with a murder, like bam, and then we're on our way. So I feel like maybe I was almost part of that speed up kind of thing. I don't know, but I don't know. Noel, you've read everything. What do you think? He's just the husband.
Right. Yeah.
It's all about competition. It has to be short so that they go to this channel, to go to this app, or this kind of
Well, everybody's doing 12 things at once, too.
Oh, okay. In the last book, Mother Daughter Traitor Spy, I remember I had some peripheral characters, and my editor was like, "You don't need those. You can cut those." I was like, "Well, I kind of like them," and she said, "No. Your readers will get distracted. There's too many names to remember." And I was like, "Oh no!" It was a new editor. She's in her 20s, and I just never had that piece of advice before. I'd never had anyone say that to me about my characters, like I had too many side characters or whatever. So that was an interesting piece of advice. I wonder if that sort of goes into trying to speed things up. Yes. 10 minutes.
Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment you were bringing
Yeah.
about the Nazis that came through in Amagansett. First of all, it's a very small museum for anyone that hasn't seen Amagansett of it. But what was very, very fascinating is that the German that brought the U-boat, that brought them in, he had plans, it was July, he had plans to go to sleep in New York.
Oh.
Actually be part of it. And it was just like very, very fascinating. Like nobody was watching to some degree.
Yeah.
Watching it. But once he saw that when he dropped them off, they got caught, he went right back.
Yeah.
Back to Germany. Yeah. Yeah, well, that plot was, I mean, that was a Marx Brothers cartoon. And in the end, that was the Amagansett thing just never was going to get off the ground. But the Coast Guard there, I mean, and a very alert guy is who set the capture in motion.
Well, but what happened was the Coast Guard that was walking, the Nazis approached him and gave him $50. And then he went to his boss or whoever it was, he didn't believe him. And then he pulled out the $50, he goes, who would give me $50? And they went
Yeah.
on
They took the train, the Long Island Railroad, from Amagansett into Penn Station, and that was they just never quite got their act together. They were actually kind of happy to be caught because, yeah. It's an interesting story. I looked at it years ago, thinking I want to write something about this. It's just so ridiculous. It's not worth even writing about, and you can't
But
do it.
you could do it.
Nah, you could.
ridiculous.
Well, you could make them better spies
Yeah.
than they were, but I'm not in the business of elevating Nazi spies. So
Well, fair enough.
yeah,
Yeah.
to the possible danger, except for the Bund in Yorkville and Madison Square Garden, which were big, scary events.
But then the Jewish, what do you call those, mafiosos, keep them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly right. Exactly. What was that called? Anybody know the name of the camp on Long Island? I forget. We had a question back here.
Wow. Well, I'm not really up on the other side of the desk in publishing. Novellas were always, when I was working for a publishing house, novellas were not really something that people would want because they didn't sell very well. But you're right. Maybe in e-format, they could be, novellas and short stories might have much more of an audience these days. I'm not that well versed in that. So, hi.
They're just
Oh.
short novels. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds better, right? Yeah.
Well, it's like the New York. It's like the mini crossword in. But if you do the crossword, you do them both anyway. So right? Yeah.
The novellas, they combine like 2 or 3.
Oh, and they sell them that way?
Way back in the book.
Oh.
It's so funny you bring that up because I personally am not a short story reader because it bothers me that they're over.
Yeah, I really want to invest.
something long to be.
So I don't know
involved
that.
in.
I'm sorry, I can't answer your question more specifically. I guess I really like the long ones.
Yes.
Oh, hi.
Places like Amazon are paying a lot of money for novella length.
Ooh.
What is a novella length?
That's a good question. It could be 45 pages. It could be 30,000 words, 35,000 words, 25,000 words.
60 to 90. How many pages are your books?
350s.
Yeah, that's about right. I can't watch a series if it's only one episode. I need a bunch, I want to get into something
Yeah.
if I'm going to. But that's me. Other
But that does
people,
make absolute sense. Yes.
how many words are people reading? Are there any studies? Boy, I don't know of anything. I don't know what the problem is. I will tell you that one of my granddaughter's friends, college kid, said to me the other day, "Oh, Lynn, I just want you to know I finally started reading, and I'm reading books now." And it's like, it's a category of things to do. I was thrilled. I was thrilled that she told me. I am more thrilled that she's doing it. But reading is now a separate an activity you have to think about, which didn't when we were growing up. Yes.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it has for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It is an audiobook. All my books are audiobooks. No, they hired someone. I wouldn't want to do it. It's a hard job. It's a really hard, specific job. They hired actresses, and God bless them, because
Does each audiobook have multiple readers?
no,
or
they have a single reader doing multiple
voices. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful new career for a lot of actors. It's given a lot of actors a lot of work, which is
Yeah,
terrific.
absolutely.
I personally cannot do fiction while I'm driving. I will go off the road. I'm into the book. I need nonfiction when I'm driving. If I'm walking,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yeah. It's dangerous. It's a dangerous thing. Yes. Siegfried Camp. Thank you. Thank you.
I also, my father was a scientist during the war, but because he had exemption, but he had to wear a uniform around, so he was in the Coast Guards patrolling, and in the evenings, Philadelphia, the port of Philadelphia.
Oh, so we can thank him
Thank
for
you.
keeping us
Thank
safe.
you. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we grew up in Philadelphia, so I thank you to your father. That's exciting. We lived right near the Navy Yard, so that's where they would have probably arrived. Exciting. That's great. Crime, real crime or crime fiction. What do you watch on TV? Are there any shows you consider particularly good?
Well, I did just finish The Vow. It just finished its second season.
Right.
And Keith Raniere, the sort of head of this cult, was sentenced in Brooklyn. It was just all very close and very near. I really enjoyed, I don't know if enjoyed is the right word, but I was really following that intently. Sometimes to just chill out, I watch Bravo. So, because everybody needs a break and everyone needs a guilty pleasure. So.
Any other questions for Susan? I heartily recommend, she's going to go and sign books now, that you get all of them, the newest one, obviously, which would be a wonderful movie. I wish it were going to be a movie. But it's a great read, Mother Daughter Traitor Spy. And if you haven't started Maggie Hope, get started. You have a wonderful series in front of you, and then we can all get on her case and scream and yell, when is the next one coming, please? I need it right away. Thank you all. You've been a terrific audience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to Susan. Thank you to
Thank
Noel.
you, Lynn.